Thank you very much, Laurent. And let me call in the next members of the panel. First of all, Mr. Zohar Zisopel. Zohar is co-founder of Rad Data Communication, and he's one of Israel's most experienced entrepreneur and investor. He's been, for example, the chairman of Argus, which we've heard from before. And our other member is Michael Granoff. Hi, Michael, founder and president of Maniv Mobility, a VC firm that focuses on the mobility sector. Thank you guys for joining us today. So I think during the last couple of years, the main focus of the discussion about the automotive industry has been about the self-driving car. And we've been focused on how will this car look and when will it arrive on the road. So I want to focus on something a little bit different today, and it will be the day after the autonomous car will be on the road. Laurent has mentioned things like regulation and brand loyalty, and I want to mention one example. The city of Los Angeles, for example, has been working for the last year with Sidewalk Labs, an Alphabet company, on regulating curbside space, because it's been expecting that the self-driving car and the car services will have the curbside space packed with pickups and dropping off passengers. So one of the ideas is to regulate this space and to charge companies for space on the curb. This is one of the examples, and I want to hear from you. What do you think will be some of the big changes after we see the self-driving car on the road? So maybe we'll start with you.
Well, there are going to be a lot of changes. Although one thing I have to say before I even start, it's going to take a long time. I mean, I knew in the newspapers autonomous cars are already here. They're not, won't be.
It's not the newspaper's fault, it's the companies that named 2021.
I know, it's a corporation. It's a corporation of newspapers and the OEM and the CEOs, but never mind. But the changes are going to be very big, I mean, and all over. And of course, in the car industry itself, I mean, the OEMs and tier ones are going to be looked totally different, and it's not a secret that Google and Apple and Amazon are coming in, etc., and they know why. But if we look at other industries, say real estate, parking, for example, in the US, for every car, there are 4 parking places. That's a I think it's similar in other countries. Now, when you think about an autonomous car that will replace in a family 2 cars, and it will take the wife to work, the husband to work, the children to school, etc., then you need much less parking space. I mean, the car will be driving more and parking less, okay? And this is a big, think about it, the number of cars in the world is billion, so we are talking about a lot of real estate that is going to change. It's something, you have to do something new with it. Insurance industry, for example. We are talking about, and I believe in that the autonomous car are going to reduce the accidents 10 times. Now, if that's the case, then the insurance for the car, for automotive, is going to go down 10 times. It's going also to be split differently. But it's not really important. If it goes down 10 times, that's a big change for an industry. Okay. Of course, data will change totally. This, by the way, happens in connected car as well, but autonomous car much more than that. There is going to be a lot of data generated in the car, and people can use it, and OEMs understand that, and that's why they're fighting and don't allow Google into the car. They know exactly what's happening, and Google knows why they want to be in the car, okay? Media and entertainment, you're going to use it totally different when you're not driving, okay? Then you have a lot of time, and you can do whatever you want, and you can use your computer, etc., etc. Hotels, something so totally different. More people are going to sleep in their cars now.
So we'll be homeless, and we'll watch we'll binge a lot of TVs.
Kind of. Think about the truck industry, truck driver. he can go on with the truck 24 hours a day while sleeping in the car instead of looking for hotels. That's simple, but other people may do it too. I mean, because you can sleep while the car is driving, so you can use your time much effectively. Of course, package delivery, food delivery, we already see that. Autonomous car will come to your doorstep and you will come out and pick up your delivery, whatever that is. Cybersecurity, you mentioned before, is going to be there is a big cybersecurity problem when the car is driving itself. Yeah. Because now if you take control of the car, it really can go, you don't even have a driver inside, they can do something about it, okay? And of course it will affect there will be much less need for drivers, okay? And there are a lot of people, by the way, driver is the most common profession in the US, at least. Now, I wouldn't worry too much because, as I said, it will take a very long time until all cars are autonomous, etc. And by that time, all the current drivers will be dead or will be on pension. So it will be, if you're looking 70 years into the future and back, then we don't need any drivers.
Okay, Mike Zohar has covered a multitude of sins. Do you have anything that you can predict that will change the day the self-driving car will hit the road?
Well, Zohar gave a pretty good list, but I think what I would emphasize, and Laurent mentioned Waze in his introduction, and in the cab ride from the airport to here, just an hour ago, the cab driver put up the Waze and he says, you know, this comes from Israel. And I said, yeah, I was aware of that. And so that was interesting. But if you think of that in terms of the fact that that's already been part of our lives for several years, and it represents part of the change in mobility that we're seeing, and that's really on the connected side. And much of the data that's all referred to, and the connectivity, Autotalks, one of our portfolio companies, was up earlier. Much of that is actually already coming into existence, already beginning to impact our lives. Obviously, another area of the new mobility paradigm, which is mobility services, has already had a profound impact on the way that we get around and commute and so forth. And these things are now converging with the other two dimensions, which is electrification and autonomy. And it's really, I think, these four things coming together that create this surge of a transformation that is, I think, only historically, the only historical analogy that we can relate to is the internet. If we sat here in 1995 and said what transformations will come as a result of interconnectivity in this way, you know, we might have predicted that some retail will go online. I don't think we would necessarily predicted that we'd have a $1 trillion company that had eclipsed all of the big names retailers of the 20th century just based on that. And you know, Benedict Evans has talked about this in terms of the winner-take-all effects that are possible in this environment. He's also mentioned something very interesting, which is that, is it possible that autonomous vehicles will save more lives through lack of smoking than in lack of accidents? 500,000 Americans die of smoking, 40,000 die of accidents every year, and it turns out more than half of tobacco sales in the US come at gas stations, which we won't be stopping at when we're in autonomous electric mobility service vehicles. So I think, you know, it's fun to think about these things. Obviously, nobody would have predicted 20 years ago what the world looks like today, and I don't think any of us is going to succeed in predicting exactly how the world will look 20 years from now, but I think we can all be safe in saying that it's going to be pretty different.
Thank you. Laurent, you mentioned before, as I said, brand awareness and ownership. Who will be the future owner of autonomous cars?
That's a good question, and when you see how the big auto companies communicate on this, they are clear that you can own a BMW, you can own a very luxury car, and still you have to decide whether you want to drive it or let the autonomous system drive you. So they don't really want to, well, they still insist on the fact that brand is important. But something I would like to insist on is the fact that with robotaxis, this would be a new challenge to the public transportation systems that we know today, because a fleet of robotaxis have the potential to replace maybe buses on certain lines. And in Paris alone, in the Paris area, public spending on public transportation is more than 7 billion every year. So anyone that can design a system more efficient than the system we know today is quite sure to be successful. So this is really something very important that the autonomous car will open. So then the question is, who will own this fleet of autonomous cars? And the question is really open.
Okay, we are at a mobility exhibition, and we have a lot of car manufacturers that are showing off in the next few terminals. But we have to remember that when we talk about the self-driving car, it was actually an idea promoted by tech companies. It started in the early 2000s by DARPA, and it was picked up in 2009 by Google, which is now Waymo. So my question is, we have the tech companies on one side and we have the car manufacturers on the other side. Is it a battle? Is it a competition? Are we going to see some kind of a major cooperation between them? Maybe who will win this race? Who will have the first vehicle on the road?
It's a fight to the death. It's not competition. And I think Google actually wants to come into the car, and it comes from several ways. It comes through the data. They want Google Assistant in the car. They want Android in the car. They want Google Maps in the car. They have a lot of tools, a very strong company and very admirable company, I mean, Google. And they want to take actually control of the car. They want the car, they want you to talk when you're in the car to say, hello, Google. They want you, like you say in your home, to your assistant. They want the car manufacturers to be manufacturers of metal, plastic, and rubber, and they want to commoditize all the cars, and the car industry understands that very well. It's the same thing that they've done to the smartphones, okay? And Microsoft did it to the computers in the past. That's what they want to do. So it's very simple. I mean, and you know, you see how the OEMs are very reluctant to cooperate with Google. They're ready to cooperate with Amazon, which may prove a mistake as well, but Amazon is not so frightening like Google is. Amazon has just Alexa. They don't have Android, they don't have Google Maps, etc. Okay, so it looks to them like something that you can cooperate with. But the last cooperation between the Alliance and Amazon, for example, is a question mark. And the Alliance are saying that they have full control over it. I doubt it.
Okay, but these two types of industries offer a very different model for the self-driving car. Isn't it, Mike?
Well, it remains to be seen what type of model will be offered by whom, but you know, I still think that even in the case of Waymo, and you're definitely right, the Google subsidiary, you know, that they are trying to get the most value, but they're also now they're relying on physical cars that are made by old line manufacturers, in that case mostly from Fiat Chrysler. I think there's a misconception that people have about, in this disruption, who is the disruptee and who's going to get disrupted. And I think that it's not necessarily automakers, because if you look, there's a very well-known automotive company in the last 10 years that has demonstrated a lot of advances, but has also demonstrated something very interesting, which is that it's not easy to stand up mass manufacturing of cars. Right, Tesla is struggling to get into the 6 figures of cars, while there are players represented, including in the city, that make more than 10 million vehicles a year. So I think it remains to be seen whether the auto companies are going to be able to find ways to become much more meaningful players in mobility, with larger margins perhaps and higher market caps, but that they're not going to disappear from the scene. If there is an incumbent, I think the incumbent here is oil. Because I don't think that new mobility in the mobility service, electrification, robo-taxi model is going to be relying on combustion engines. And oil has had an incredible run for 120 years. But I think that's the industry that really needs to pivot.
In terms of trust and customers' loyalty, do you think that people will be willing to go into a Google-made car, or will they still trust the brands they know and used to?
Well, Google and Apple tried to do cars, and they understand, they found out how difficult it is, and unlike Tesla, they didn't go into doing car. So they still want the OEMs to do car for them, but they want on the car to be Google or Apple. And they want the OEM just to give up the brand. Okay. And by the way, the OEMs which are cooperating with Google are the weak ones. The ones where the brand is not strong, and they say, well, let's sell some more cars. It's not that important. The strong OEMs are not, and they know why. Because if they will cooperate with Google or with Apple, they will lose their brand. And that's, you know, the difference nowadays, maybe I shouldn't say it in the car, between a high brand like BMW or Mercedes and a kind of a low brand, which I won't even mention names, okay, but you know how many, it's not much. I mean, all cars are good, they drive well, they are very reliable. And the difference is small. The difference, you're paying three times more money for a BMW for the brand, not for the real value. There is some value there. I'm not saying no, but you know, you're paying much more than that. Now, if that is taken away, and the brand is Google operated or Amazon operated or Apple operated, etc., then car industry are going to be the same as smartphones, producing a lot of smartphones for very, very low profit.
Okay. Lauren, as I mentioned before, that the tech companies had a head start on the technology-wise, and the car manufacturers joined the party when they saw the technology is mature enough to build upon. In your opinion, have the car manufacturers caught up technology-wise?
I don't think the car companies are lagging behind in any ways. They just need maybe less to communicate because they don't need to raise cash to make this kind of research. So they are definitely not lagging, but they need to cooperate because designing a fully autonomous car is such a complex task that, in my view, nobody is able to really manage the whole ecosystem that's necessary. So this is why I believe that yes, they need to cooperate with Google. They need to cooperate with all companies managing AI and artificial intelligence and knowledge, but they are not lagging behind.
Okay. So time is up, and we haven't even touched companies like Uber and Lyft and Get, but hopefully next year. So thank you guys very much. It's been a pleasure.